Now what I'm going to do is define another array, and this is going to be called allowed underscore extensions, or I've shortened it to ext. And this is going to be an array, and this time we are going to put some values in here. So the first one I'm going to do JPG, and then I'm going to do JPEG, and remember we're separating these with a comma. And then I'm going to do, let's say, PNG and GIF. Okay, so these are a list of the allowed extensions you want. Now you probably noticed that earlier when I had, oh no, we need to go over to our browser. When I had these examples up, we've got capital JPG and small PNG. Now whether the user uploads an extension that has a capital JPG or another capital extension, we're going to be using another function, str to lower the value of the file extension so it matches these. So you don't really need to go ahead and do JPG and JPEG. Essentially you're just wasting elements in your array, or you're wasting your data. So we have an allowed extension array. Now what we need to do is pinpoint the specific data that we need from this array here, this files array. So we've already used this to check if the general array has been set. Now what we need to do is pick out specific bits of information, and that is going to be file name, and that's going to equal something, file extension, and that's going to equal something, and we get the file extension obviously from the file name. So with this it's just going to be a reference of this, and I'm going to show you how to get the extension from the file. We also need to check the file size, and we also need the file temporary location. Okay, so for the file name we do $_files, and then we have image. Remember we're referencing it from the array that we echoed out earlier. But then what we need to do is add two more brackets, and in here we need to say name, because this is a value that corresponds to the name. Like earlier when we did this, you can see that we've got name here, and that will be coconut.png or whatever the file name you're uploading is. Okay, so that's how that works. The file extension we're going to come to a bit later. The file size, we're essentially just replicating this, so we can even copy and paste that down to save ourselves a bit of time, and we just put size in there. So remember, if you're unsure of these variables, as I showed earlier, you can use the print r and then $_files, and what that will do is it will just give you this out, and you can check each individual key of this array. So we've got name, type, TMP name. So this is the one that a lot of people tend to forget. It's TMP_name, not TEMP_name. So you can always do this here to check that. Okay, so now the file temp, that is $_, well, we can paste that in, and remember it's TMP_name. Okay, so if you're finding any errors, you might have accidentally put an extra E in there or something like that. Okay, so the file extension, this is really important. We need to determine the extension of the file in order to say, does it equal any of these? If we were uploading if we're uploading a PHP file, you may have PHP there. Okay, so we're going to use another function later on to check that against these. So if it doesn't match any of these, we're not going to let the user upload the file. Okay, so how do we go ahead about getting .php or JPG or JPEG? Well, we need to use the explode function in PHP, and what this does is it takes a value here, which is going to be dot in our case, and it explodes the string into an array. So what we basically need to do is we need to separate this with the file name. So what we can do just to test this out is we can come down and we can echo file, or no we can't, we can print r file ext, and remember print r is going to give us a textual representation of an array, and now that we've exploded this file name, it will be an array of each element of the file. Now if for example it was coconut.png, the two elements that were returned are coconut and png, so we can then use another function which I'll talk about in a moment just to grab the last bit of this, which is which is PNG. The dot won't exist because we've delimited it by the dot here. Okay, so let's do this. Let's upload a file again and check what happens. So click upload. You can see that we've got an array now. The first key, so key 0, is coconut, and the second key, which is key 1, is PNG. So we now need a way to grab this value here on its own, because as it stands we can't actually compare an array to a specific value. We need to grab this value here, and we do this in PHP using the end function. So the file extension we can now wrap in this end function, and what this end function is going to do is it's going to take the last element of the array, i.e. PNG, because this is the first element, this is the last element. So let's go ahead and re-upload a file. Click upload, and you can see now we just get PNG back, because now this end has been converted from an array to a string. We've grabbed the last element in the array and converted it back to a string. So now that we've done that, let's just test it with a few other files. So .jpg. Now you can see we've got JPG, and then again with PHP, upload, and you can see we've got PHP. So ensure you test this before you do anything else, because as long as you've got this bit right, then we can perform the correct checks and ensure that the file is acceptable to upload. Now there is one problem. I've purposely included a file with .jpg but in capitals. Now if you go ahead and look at our array, we don't have JPG in capitals. As I mentioned earlier, it would be a waste of space to repeat yourself in the array. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this function, well these two functions again, but in str to lower. So it's basically string to lowercase. Remember the brackets, we're surrounding this whole thing here in brackets. And what that's going to do is whatever the file extension is, it's going to convert the whole thing to lowercase. So if we were to choose coconut.png, you can see that the PNG is small because it is already small in the file extension. However, if we were to go and choose this one with a capital .jpg, you can see that we upload and then we always get a lowercase returned. Therefore we can compare this to this, and regardless of the capitalization of the extension, it's always going to be the same, and we can make the comparison. So hopefully that makes sense. We can remove that now. Okay, let's pull that up a bit. Now we need to do our checks. So we first of all need to check that the file extension is allowed. So we can say if. We've created an if statement with a condition and then a block. So we're going to say if, and we're going to use a function called in_array. And this is going to take two parameters. The first parameter is the string that you're looking for, and the second parameter is the array that you want to look for the string in. So if you have already worked out, we need to look for the file extension in the allowed extension array. So we can just type in file extension and allowed extension. Okay, so this is checking for the current file extension of the file that's been uploaded and comparing it to all the values in this array here. So if it was PHP, file extension would be PHP. Now if in array file extension and this was PHP and allowed extension does not contain PHP, this whole statement here would return false. So what we can do is we can say doesn't equal false at the end. You don't need to do this, but you know, it's good practice too, I guess. Oh, sorry, actually what we do need is rather than not equals, sorry, that's just my logic, we need a triple equals. This is just going to check that the array has returned false. So if it has returned false, the extension does not exist, therefore it's not one that we've defined to be allowed. So I'm going to bring my errors array that I created earlier into play, and remember it's an array, so we need square brackets, and that's going to equal extension not allowed. Okay, so pretty simple. And later on, if we do the same thing as this, say down here, but change the condition, we can actually then keep track of errors, because all this is doing is adding an extra element to the array.